Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're taking a seriously fascinating journey into the human mind. We're going to look at exactly how our moral compass is built, and more importantly, how it gets completely stress-tested by the harsh realities of money, scarcity, and sudden wealth. We're tracing the arc of moral complexity. So we'll start with those really simple, black and white lessons we absorb as kids and follow them all the way to the incredibly messy, legally complicated, and psychologically draining decisions we have to make as adults. It's a brilliant look at who we really are when the financial stakes are high.
So I want you to answer this question honestly, just in your own head. If you found a wallet on the street today, like right this second, what would you do? It seems like a super simple question, right? But as you'll see, your answer actually depends on a whole bunch of underlying factors. Things like what you were taught as a child, the specific legal jurisdiction you happen to be standing in, and, believe it or not, even how much money is currently sitting in your checking account.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with shaping our moral compass, then break down the anatomy of ethical dilemmas. Third, we'll answer the legal question of finders keepers or stealing. Fourth, we'll dive into the psychology of scarcity. And finally, we'll look at navigating sudden wealth safely. Let's get right into it.
All right, Section 1, Shaping Our Moral Compass.
Think back for a minute. Where do our foundational ideas of right and wrong actually come from? Because the truth is, we aren't just born with a complex understanding of ethics. We're taught it, and usually we're taught it through stories. Take that classic, widely shared short story about the honest boy who finds a wallet full of cash. For a split second, the kid thinks about how this money could totally change his life, but then he remembers his mother's advice: honesty is more valuable than money. So he returns the wallet to an old man who rewards him and tells him never to lose that honesty. It's a beautiful, completely straightforward narrative, you know? Good actions are rewarded, bad actions are discouraged. When we're young, morality is served up to us with zero gray area.
And this beautifully illustrates how ancient traditions use storytelling as literal moral blueprints. Take the deeply moving Indian tale of Rohan and the mango tree. When Rohan is a young boy, he plays in the tree's shade every day. One day, the tree asks him what he wants to be when he grows up. Rohan says he wants to be a big, successful man so his parents never face any hardship. The tree just smiles and tells him, never let go of hard work and honesty. But as Rohan grows up, life gets busy. He only returns to the tree when he needs something. First, he comes back sad because his family is struggling financially, so the tree freely gives him all its mangoes to sell. Years later, he returns needing a house, and without a second thought, the tree tells him to cut off its branches to build it. Finally, decades pass. Rohan returns as an old, tired man with white hair, just looking for peace. The tree, now just a weak stump, says it has nothing left to give but a place to sit. As Rohan rests on the stump, he starts to cry, realizing he only ever took from the tree and never asked how it was doing. The tree just smiles and says, true love never keeps accounts. It's in that moment Rohan realizes the tree was exactly like his parents, or nature itself, giving everything selflessly, without ever asking for a single thing in return. He vows right then to serve his parents and plant new trees for future generations. Stories like this aren't just for entertainment, they hardwire us with concepts of selfless love, respect, and duty long before we actually have to face the real world.
Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of Ethical Dilemmas.
But then we grow up, right? And as adults, we really quickly realize the world isn't just good guys and bad guys. We enter this messy realm of philosophical gray areas, or what's known in Hindi as naitik duvida, an ethical dilemma. Now, in philosophy, a genuine ethical dilemma isn't just choosing between doing something good and doing something slightly bad. Not at all. It's a highly specific, agonizing situation where you face multiple conflicting moral obligations and literally no single choice overrides the other. It basically means that no matter what you choose, you're going to fail to live up to some obligation. Every single available choice feels wrong.
To really clear this up, let's look at two totally different scenarios. On one hand, you have a resolvable conflict. Let's say you're running late for a massive business meeting, but on the way, you see a drowning child. Obviously, this is easy. Saving a human life vastly outweighs being late for a meeting. There is zero dilemma there. But on the other hand, consider a symmetrical dilemma. The famous philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre described a student living in France during the German occupation. This student had to choose between leaving home to fight and liberate his country or staying home to care for his grieving mother, who had actually already lost one son. Think about that. Duty to your country versus duty to your family. Both are absolute moral imperatives. Neither clearly outweighs the other. That is a true agonizing ethical dilemma. and it results in what philosophers call moral residue, which is basically this lingering feeling of guilt no matter what path you take.
Which brings us to Section 3, finders keepers or stealing.
Let's loop back to that opening question about the wallet on the street. Is it really finders keepers? Well, spoiler alert, no. There is a rather harsh legal reality here that genuinely surprises a lot of people. Simply finding money or property and just keeping it, without trying to locate the owner, is legally considered stealing by finding. The law actually expects you to demonstrate that you don't intend to fraudulently keep the item. You are legally obligated to take reasonable steps, like handing it over to the police or giving it to the management of the building where you found it to try and reunite it with its true owner.
However, it's not totally black and white. Case law, like the famous Parker versus British Airways Board case, does actually outline a few specific conditions where finders keepers can legally apply. You can claim ownership against the rest of the world, but only if you clear these 3 hurdles. First, you absolutely must have acted honestly to reunite the item with the true owner. Second, the true owner absolutely cannot be found. And third, the item has to have been found on land that isn't sufficiently controlled by someone else. If you don't meet all 3 of those criteria, your childhood dream of finding treasure on the sidewalk is, legally speaking, just theft.
Okay, Section 4, the psychology of scarcity.
Beyond just the legal frameworks, the intersection of money and morality goes incredibly deep when we look at the psychology of scarcity. Like, how does a lack of money act as a massive psychological stress test on our decision-making? Well, the brilliant research of Eldar Shafir reveals that people experiencing poverty are just constantly attuned to the economic dimensions of everyday life. Thoughts about cost don't just happen when you sit down to pay a bill. They are triggered spontaneously, and they are persistent. Shafir gives this incredible example of a doctor's visit. For a wealthy person, they're sitting in the office just listening to the medical diagnosis. Simple. But for someone struggling financially, it's basically like a dichotic listening task. In one ear, they're hearing the doctor's health advice, but in the other ear, their brain is automatically calculating the price of the medication, the cost of taking time off work, and stressing over whether they can afford it at all.
And this scarcity literally rewires our mental associations. When researchers asked participants to just let their minds wander and then tested their semantic networks, how words are actually connected in their brains, this fascinating divide popped up. For a wealthy person, words like rent, grocery, and phone are viewed as disconnected, everyday routine expenses. But for a person experiencing poverty, all of those words are tightly, inevitably wired to one massive overarching concept: money. When your brain is constantly dedicating all this mental bandwidth just to survive scarcity, your capacity to navigate other complex life choices, including moral ones, is under immense, invisible pressure.
Finally, Section 5, navigating sudden wealth safely. So let's flip the coin completely. What happens to our choices when we suddenly acquire a ton of money? Interestingly, sudden wealth, like from an inheritance or winning the lottery, can be just as mentally destabilizing as scarcity. When people suddenly strike it rich, the immediate moral impulse is almost always to share the good news and start giving money to family. But consumer protection experts are waving giant red flags here, warning that rash decisions often lead to total disaster. Early disclosure, especially blasting it out on social media, massively increases your risk of getting targeted by scams, fraud, and really bitter family quarrels. So the recommended steps are super clear. Number 1, resist the urge to share the news immediately. Keep it quiet. Number 2, take your time. Literally, there's zero rush. And number 3, enlist a professional financial planner before you make a single move.
Let's look at a real-world case study. A couple named Graham and Jeanette brilliantly illustrate why this advice is so absolutely crucial. They received a sudden windfall, but their family dynamic was, well, it was complicated. They were permanently estranged from Jeanette's son, but they still maintained a really lovely relationship with their granddaughter. Now, if they had just followed their gut and started handing out cash blindly, they could have faced massive tax liabilities or totally inflamed those existing family tensions. Instead, they sought out what experts call a safe pair of hands, a transparent, objective, professional advisor. This gave them the space to step back, properly adjust their wills, and create a highly logical plan to support their granddaughter in a meaningful way, all without jeopardizing their own retirement. It proves that good intentions just aren't enough. Execution requires careful, completely objective planning.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer, leaving us with this final, genuinely provocative thought. We started out with those childhood stories, like Rohan and the mango tree, that told us honesty and duty are just simple, straightforward choices. But as we've seen today through strict legal frameworks, agonizing philosophical dilemmas, and the intense psychological pressures of both poverty and sudden wealth,
Our choices are deeply, deeply intertwined with our circumstances. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. Are our moral choices truly our own, or are they simply a product of our environment and our bank account? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you next time.